We now look once again at our good dead friend, René Descartes. All the background stuff remains the same. Instead, we're focusing on Cartesian dualism in this context. Now, Descartes embraces a substance metaphysics, and he's a classical dualist, not in the sense of like swords or pistols, at dawn, Alexander Hamilton style, but rather in terms of accepting two basic substances. So for Descartes, what is a substance? Well, what he does is he uses the ancient and medieval concept of substance and defines it this way, translated into English. It's a thing which exists in such a way as to depend on no other thing for its existence. Now, technically speaking, given Descartes' view, only God would meet this strict definition, because only God could exist in such a way as to depend on nothing else. Now, put in a more limited and metaphorical sense, created beings can be regarded as substances, but not in the strict sense of being able to exist without any dependence on anything else. Now, as I noted before, Descartes is famous for accepting two substances, the mental substance and the physical substance. This means that for Descartes, the mind and body are distinct substances, one mental, the mind, and one physical, the body. In terms of his reasons for this, perhaps oddly, one of his arguments for it is from the Meditations and based on doubt, oddly enough. So, based on his reasonings in his famous meditations on, first philosophy, the 6 meditations, he takes mind and body to be distinct. Why? Well, because in the course of his meditation, no matter how much he doubted, he could not doubt his own existence. So he was sure that his mind existed, but he was in doubt about the existence of his body. Since, based on this doubt and certainty, certain about the mind, uncertain about the body, since the mind does not need the body to exist or to be understood, he infers the mind is distinct from the body, because the mind cannot be doubted, but the body can, so according to Descartes and his reasoning, they're distinct. So the mind and body are distinct substances, according to Descartes. So somewhat oddly, a skeptical argument that leads to dualism. He also advances the argument that they're distinct substances because they have different essential attributes. So in the case of minds, they have the following qualities. They engage in conscious actions, such as thinking, willing, doubting, believing, etc. They are not extended in space, so they're non-spatial. They're immaterial, sometimes known as incorporeal, and put in popular terms, they would be kind of ghost-like. They don't have any parts, according to Descartes, so they're not divisible. You can't break them up into parts. And so all the stuff that goes on in the mind is not the result of different parts, but different functions. And again, since they're not extended, they don't extend spatially, but they also don't occupy space, according to him. And so, in a way, kind of strange. So what about the body? Well, for him, bodies, which would include, the human body, but also include, physical objects as well, they're not conscious. Now, you may think, well, surely, I'm conscious, but Descartes would say, yes, you are conscious, but it's not your body that's conscious, it's you, and you are your mind. Bodies for him move mechanically, the result of mechanical physical forces. They're extended, so, three-dimensional. They're made of parts, and so are divisible, because parts is parts. And they occupy space. So the second argument is because these two, entities, these two substances, have different, these different qualities, that is evidence they are, in fact, two different substances, because they're so radically different, they can't be the same thing. Or so he claims. So what about humans and animals? Well, we'll see more of this when we talk about Descartes talking in detail about animals. We humans, and presumably, possibly, anything else that would be intelligent as well, at least according to Descartes, we consist, each of us, of a mechanistic material body and an immaterial mind. So we have the ghost and the shell, to use an anime title. So the mind is the person. So you are a mind, you have a body, according to Descartes. What about animals? Well, as we'll see in detail in the reading on Descartes' view of animals lack minds. They're merely bodies. Now, he's not saying they don't have brains, because you might say, well, don't animals have brains? And Descartes would say, sure they do. But they lack minds. And for Descartes, the mind is not the brain is not the mind. So for Descartes, animals are essentially natural automatons. To, kind of jokingly put, you could call them God's robots. Now, he doesn't deny they're alive, and doesn't deny that they feel things, provided that feeling is just a matter of bodily motions, that is to say, these mechanical functions. And as we'll see, his, spoiler alert, he takes the most telling argument, the strongest argument against animals having minds, to be based on the fact that they do not use language, or so he claims. So he ends up embracing, obviously enough, Cartesian dualism. It's a view there are two irreducible kinds of principles or elements. And so with this metaphysical dualism, there are two basic ontological kinds, the mind and the body. So Descartes accepts what is known as mind-body dualism, sometimes known as psychophysical dualism, psycho from psyche, the mind, and of course physical from physical. And this is the view that the mind and body are distinct metaphysical entities or types. And again, for Descartes, two fundamental metaphysical types. Now, part of the problem that he runs into is this. If you got two fundamental types of stuff, how does this work? Now, one reason, or another reason he accepts these two fundamental types of stuff is because of his Cartesian compromise. What's this compromise? Well, Descartes, like thinkers, many other thinkers in his time, embraced science. He endorsed what was then known as the new science. Of course, now it would be the old science. And this new science provided a mechanistic account of the universe. We saw this earlier, the type of science that was the same science endorsed by Thomas Hobbes, etc. And so you have, on the one hand, the new science, saying that everything is, matter and motion governed by math. But Descartes was also a devout Catholic, and so he wanted to reconcile the science with theology. So how do you make that work? Well, his brilliant, if problematic, solution was dualism. So you end up with a body and a mind. So one part of the world would consist of physical substances, the world of the body. This part would be studied by science and explained in purely mechanistic terms. This would be the clockwork mechanism whose operations are determined by physical laws. And scientists discover these physical laws through observations, and this enables predictions to be made. The human body itself is governed by these physical laws. So the workings of, our heart, the one that pumps blood, the working of the liver, the working of even the brain would be governed by physical laws. So if you ask Descartes, does all of the physiological stuff, is that governed by physical laws? He would say, sure. Well, he would if he was alive. So this realm of the physical, you could say, belongs to science and not to theology. So you wouldn't do theology to know how, the heart worked or how, the stars, do their thing. But of course, for Descartes, there's the other part of the world as well, because he's a dualist. The other part is the mind. And this would be composed of immaterial substances. So he thinks that this allows us to have free will. Why? Well, because the mind is exempt from physical laws, because it's not a physical entity, it's immaterial. Now, of course, critics point out the obvious thing. Why would being non-physical mean it's exempt from laws, and why would that make it somehow free? So, matters of the soul belong to theology and religion. So, there's this compromise. You have a physical world for the sciences, and you have the incorporeal world for religion. And so you can have, you could have physical determinism for the physical objects, but then have the will be free. Now, as you might imagine, having two very fundamentally different types of substances would seem to lead to some problems. Now, this problem is what's called the mind-body problem, one of the many classic problems in philosophy. Because Descartes claims that the human mind controls the human body. So your mind controls your body, my mind controls my body. And so the problem is, how do these two fundamentally different substances somehow interact? How does the ghost control the machine? Now, he does consider an analogy, of course. So one possibility is the mind directs the body like a pilot controlling a ship. Or to use a modern metaphor, like a driver controlling a car. Or sci-fi, like a pilot, driving around a mech. Now, Descartes argues that the ship analogy and pilot analogy, although appealing, doesn't work. Why? Well, there's an obvious problem with it. If it were true that a person controlled their body like a pilot controls a ship, then people wouldn't feel pain when their bodies are injured. If back in Descartes' day, he was well aware if someone's, steering the ship around, and the ship, say, scrapes some barnacles, scrapes some rocks, and takes some damage to the hull, the pilot's not going to feel that. Sure, they would feel, being sort of rocked around, so to speak, but they don't feel the ship's pain. Or to use a modern, analogy, when you're driving your car, if your, engine, breaks down, you don't feel the pain of the car. I mean, you'll feel the pain of having to pay the high cost of getting the engine fixed, but you don't feel your car's pain. So, since we feel pain when we're injured, and other things as well, Descartes says, well, clearly the mind and body interact. So there's got to be this interactionism. And the mind-body problem is, well, how does this work? Again, how does the ghost drive the machine? Now, kind of weirdly, near the end, not this part's not weird, but near the end of Descartes' life, the pineal gland was discovered. And the discovery is not the weird thing. Now, at the time, the purpose was not known. But now we know it's an endocrine gland. It's believed to play a role in blood pressure regulation. Interestingly, possibly also dreaming, because Descartes has his dream problem. Now, Descartes was pretty excited by this, because once the pituitary gland was discovered, he thought, aha, this is the gland that's affected by what he called the vital spirits, and was somehow the intermediary between the mind and the body, specifically the brain. Now, even though he was pretty excited about this, there's an obvious problem. Pointing to a particular, thing in the brain and saying, yes, that's where it interacts, still doesn't explain how the ghost drives the machine. It's like pointing to a particular, button and saying, yes, that's the button the ghost pushes to make the, to turn on the computer. But if the problem is, how does a ghost work the keyboard, pointing to a particular button doesn't solve that problem, to use the analogy. And so since the pineal gland is still a material object, there's still the mind-body problem. And that's considered by many to be sort of the bedeviling problem of Cartesian dualism. How does the immaterial ghost control the machine? So that's the basics of Cartesian dualism. Now, one of the big implications of Cartesian dualism, as I noted earlier, was for non-human animals. And we'll continue our adventures with Descartes looking at the automatism of animals.